Wright, who was one of the first African American graduates from Harvard Medical School. That's so that to talk about history when it comes down to medicine. He was born into that family
Oh,
and
absolutely.
born into medicine. Um,
Yes.
her favorite subject, Dr. Jane Wright's favorite subject, were math and science. After attending Fieldston School, Wright received a scholarship to Smith College, where she furthered her studies and continued to be very involved with extracurricular activities. She discovered a passion for the German language, interesting enough, and after her time at Smith, Wright received another scholarship to attend New York Medical College, where she graduated as part of an accelerated 3-year program at the top of her class in 1945 with an honors award. But basically, the understanding about the intelligence, especially when it comes down to our women, they are very intelligent. Make no mistake about that.
As a
Um,
matter of fact, it's the most educated group in the United States. I'm not sure about the world, but
I'll I'll vouch for that.
absolutely, no question about it. No question about it. Well, let's get to Dr. Mango and Tiffany and Clayton. You can jump in after Dr. Mango introduces herself. No one can tell your story better than you can, Dr. Mango. So
Well,
give us a little background.
that's what Virginia State pays me to do. And I tell my students, I said, sometimes I give them a little trick. I'll go in there and I'll talk about history. And I'll say in 1942, this happened. Then in 1953, according to your book, this happened. Then according to your book, then in chapter 4, we went on to learn this. And they just sit there. Then I'll say, I just made all of that up. See, you didn't read. but but nevertheless, it is certainly an honor and a privilege. And let me just say that thank you so much for having this show. You know, these type of spaces, oftentimes people don't realize the work that goes into this, the dedication that goes into this. And I want you all to keep striving and stuff like that. I mean, it's so wonderful to have these spaces. And as a historian, I can tell you in the future, these type of spaces are going to be so valuable in real time. You all are, this is like writing a book. Every time y'all come on here, this is like writing a book. And so I'm not, I'm not sure about viewership now, whatever the case may be, but in the future, I'm telling you, in real time, you all are doing such a service for us. And as a person, a historian, and one who is a HBCU professor, I'm just so honored for the opportunity. I was thinking, I have a Black degree from an HBCU, and I am a HBCU professor, and I teach Black history at a HBCU. This is a dream come true. And while it comes with a lot of challenges, I can say, like, going back to the space that you all have in this show, as a historian, I'm able to see things differently. I see things, really, I'm a futurist, believe it or not. Although I see a lot of things in the past, I see things in the future. How will the past be received in the future? And I'm telling you that this show is such a great opportunity for us in Swing and Groove. And for a group of people who were forbidden from reading and writing for 250 years, forbidden from being able to recollect our history. See, you had the process of making a slave had to involve a disconnection from any type of historical considerations in a formal way. You all are providing people a formalized way to and capture their history and then capture in real time what's going on. So what you're doing is so valuable, and continue doing it. And I certainly appreciate you all for inviting me.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to us because we come together collectively from different parts of the country in some cases. And like I said, we want to showcase the best to our students, to our public, whether they're babies, Bob, I would encourage also that anyone who's listening to us, bring your child around the radio and listen to this. You can be a teenager, you could be in college, or uh, uh, a working family, or maybe a more mature adult. There's value in this for everyone. So thank you so much for saying that. I'm going to start with somebody that you know, which happens to be my brother Clayton Brown, and I'm sure he has a question for you, or maybe a comment or something of that nature. Then we'll go to Tiffany.
Yes, yes. Greetings to everyone. Robert, my brother William, Tiffany, Dr. Mango. I'm glad that you was able to come back on. And she happened to be our campus advisor, and she was gracious enough to be able to step in when we needed that help. And I appreciate you so much for doing that because you know what the uphill battles were that we was facing. And I really thank you for that. Um, I really don't have much of a question for you because I know you are very good at what you do, and I understand that you also an historian for Virginia State and Virginia Union. Am I correct?
Yes, I work part-time at Virginia Union.
Okay. And
Mhm.
so how does that work for you between the both schools?
You know, like I said, out of anything is humbling. I think that being a historian, working in the HBCU community and having a PhD and all of this, you encounter some very stuck up Black people. And I just never wanted to be that. And I've never wanted, that just was just never me. Because the history allowed me to always be in real time, understanding with great gratitude just how much is such an honor to teach Black students Black history, world history, American history at Virginia Union and Virginia State. So doing that, it's really a dream come true for me. And it's so interesting because the universities have such differences. You see the difference between being at a Christian college at Virginia Union and being at a public institution at Virginia State.
Hmm.
So, for example, in a meeting at Virginia Union, they might start off with a prayer that's very religious oriented. But at Virginia State, that's not necessarily how we might approach things. So it's some differences and there's some similarities. But overall, it's really for me, it's just I just sometimes I just get so overwhelmed. And my students don't know that I cry. They don't know I cry like Lenny Williams before class.
Yeah.
I'm so filled with just looking out at these Black faces and teaching them history and just and seeing lights come on. And so
Mm.
it's just really an honor and a privilege for me to work at both institutions.
So, doctor, with that said, I understand you say do you have to approach the students at each university separately when you're teaching your history?
Yes, I have to take a different approach. It's interesting because one of the challenges with teaching African American history is that Black people, we're very religious.
Yes.
And it's a lot of things we don't quite understand about religion. And so um African American history intersects a lot with religion. And so Virginia Union is a religious institution and they are known for giving religious degrees. And then Virginia State is not necessarily that, but we have a very religious student population. We're all very religious. I mean, we are Black people, we're religious. And so the approach is different because I have to be very careful in how I teach history because I know that we're religious, but we have not had a historical religious education. It's a difference between the history of religion and religion. And and that's actually a challenge for me. It's a challenge at Virginia Union to teach about the origins of humanity coming from Africa while
Hmm.
simultaneously we're learning my students learn something else about the origins of humanity that we might learn every Sunday in Sunday school. And then at Virginia State, teaching about the origins of humanity coming from Africa, they might be learning about it in biology from a different point of view. So history is interesting. Teaching Black people history, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's not as uh it's not as it's not fun. It's psychologically sometimes very emotional. It's very hard for me to do. It's something that I probably would not have selected again. It's an honor and I take it serious, but it's very hard to get people to understand history.
And I have one.
Because
I have.
you have Mhm.
I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I have one more question.
Hmm.
Could you tell us one thing that will actually shock us that we do not know about our history? Uh,
One.
Okay.
well, there's a
No, that was a
couple.
great question. I would say this. This is the one, and I had a student call me that I taught years ago, and he said, "I remember because I've calmed down a lot from what I used to be before I had kids and before I was, you know, but I think one of the most shocking things is it, and that hurts me. It pains me that Black people we don't know who King James was. We don't realize that the person that we use in our Bibles,
Hmm.
that's the person that actually enslaved. We was brought to Jamestown, Virginia. He was the one that started the enslavement of us. And so that's one of the connections between Jamestown, Virginia and the King James Bible and how we were brought to Jamestown, Virginia first, really out by Hampton. And that this is the person that, and so I think that that's one of the things that the students really they start to connect the dots more and more and more once they understand that.
And now,
But that's
since
not,
you
that
are
doesn't mean that I'm saying I'm anti-religion or anti anything.
right,
I'm just saying that that's a shocking thing.
I'm a Christian believer, but one of the things, since you're on that, and I read this years ago, is it true that it took King James at least 10 times before he approved the King James Bible?
I don't, it might be, I'm not sure. I only look at it from the perspective of what role did he play in African American history. And to me,
Okay.
so I'm not an expert on King James and stuff like that, and he's done some phenomenal things. But at the same time, I just find it troubling sometimes that on Sundays that we never have taught because we were enslaved and because we are so religious and we so don't understand, we don't know the right historical questions to ask. Our mind doesn't say who was this person. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I'm saying we should not use it, but to me it is kind of interesting that on Sundays that Black people collectively are going to use the Bible of someone who actually started our enslavement,
Hmm.
commenced our enslavement in America. So that is something that I
That,
believe is shocking.
that's good food for thought. Thank you for that.
All right.
Tiffany.
Well, hola, my sister. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. So just starting off, what if I may, because I'm trying to get the background info. What school did you graduate from and how did you get involved with swing?
Okay, so I went to Grambling State University at HBCU in Louisiana. And at that time, swing, I used to hang with my cousin is a groove from Grambling. And I always wanted to be a swing, but they weren't really on the yard. I always had a consciousness, and even though I always had this historical consciousness, and I never wanted to call myself a Black Greek. That just, I don't know, I just didn't want to do that. Although I have a lot of respect and admiration for the Black Greeks, I just that just it just something about that. And so I pledged actually DC Metro graduate chapter later. But so I did not pledge at Grambling. I don't think that it was on the yard at that particular time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. I found your conversation very interesting, and you was talking about, or you mentioning that teaching Black history can be challenging, and I was thinking, wow, why? Because I would love to have been one of your students. Because when I hear about our history, you hear people like Bessie Coleman, the very first Black stunt pilot, and she had to go to France to get a license. Uh, Charles Frederick Payne. And a lot of people think the Wright brothers had the first patent with the airplane. Robert, you can fact check me, please, if I'm wrong. But it was Charles Frederick Payne who had the first patent for an airplane. Charles Drew. You heard about blood transfusion, blood plasma. Then we have Charles Drew to think about. I'm thankful for that because there's so many lives that have been saved throughout the time. Daniel Hale Williams, first successful heart transplant. We can go on. Henry T. Sampson, created of the first cell phone. Katherine Johnson, critical calculations of dealing with NASA. We can go on. Garrick Morgan, Elijah McCoy. We can go on. So when I hear names like that and I hear about their accomplishment, I get so excited. So when you're saying it can be challenging, I would be excited to be in your class. Do you have students that are excited to be there? I mean,
Yeah, they're excited, but they're excited to be there. But I think that when they come in my class, I always say, okay, what can I give them that they've never? All of you have been in high school, college, whatever. It's hard to remember things. When I think back to high school, I'm like, what did I remember in high school in that history? I can't hardly remember anything. Right. Then when I think that even at Grambling, it's a few things that I remember from history. Even in my PhD program, it's a few things I remember. I'm very concerned with making sure that I give them, and all the information you said is very important. But from my perspective, I'm like, what is it that I could give them that's going to change their life?
Yeah.
How do I make this history functional and practical? How do I make it where knowing that information will actually have a real life, tangible effect on them?
Yeah.
And so that's why I deal with these questions that are very challenging oftentimes to process, that we don't understand. Like, how did we come to speak English? How did we get these names? What was life like? What would life have been like had we never been enslaved? Why were the first HBCUs private Christian colleges? So what I'm saying is, while that might not seem like very difficult questions, oftentimes once you get into it, some of it is very difficult. And also the goal and the purpose is to get them to be critical analysis thinkers. So I want them, like, the hardest class that I ever taught was actually hip hop history. And I'll tell you why. The students didn't want to be critical of it. It's like I couldn't critique it. I couldn't say that, hey, it's hip hop. If I said anything about hip hop and it maybe having some negative effects on our community, it was very problematic. So sometimes the way approaching these different topics can be very challenging. And my goal every class is to give them something that they're going to remember when they are 80, 100 years old. I don't want them to never to forget what I said. I want them to remember, and I want them to be able to use it every single day of their life. I want history to transform their life. And so it becomes challenging because I have to get into their consciousness from a place that is a very uncomfortable place sometimes, because I have to kind of ask them about their norms. How did what they consider normal become normal? What is the origins of that? So that's some of the challenge. And then sometimes it's depressing. It's very depressing teaching African American history for a lot of our students. Yeah, we have done some things that you have mentioned, but overall, is we've done that despite our um, challenge. And so it can be psychologically taxing for the students as well.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna go to Robert. Robert put up something there. I was talking about Charles Frederick Page, born
Okay.
1865, 1937, of Pinefield, Louisiana. Was an African American inventor who patented an airship in 1906. His design improved stability, propulsion, and control, advancing airship technology. So, Robert, I think I was correct in saying that he patented his before the Wright brothers did. Is that correct?
His was going to be before the Wright brothers, yes. But it's
Yes.
kind of interesting because his Frederick Page's story continues by saying that even though that there was the fact that he did make a full-scale model in 1904, however, it disappeared mysteriously on the
Hmm.
way to the Louisiana Purchase Exposition
Yes.
because of the sense of this is a great invention, but due to Jim Crow era laws at that time, Page's Page's airship basically was not considered to be an invention, which is sad also because when we talk about a lot of inventions and also Dr. Mango, you're talking about history, and definitely thank you for being there in the classroom. It is heartbreaking to know that a lot of these technological advances, a lot of the inventions, a lot of the new ways of living that Black people made, African Americans made, were taken from them,
Hmm.
especially around the turn of the century, because even though they had a lot of inventions, a lot of ideas, they didn't have the money to put up to secure the patents. So it went to whoever their master was at the time, and then their master's name had the name on the patent as if it was their own invention when it really wasn't. So
Yes.
that's part of our history. And definitely realizing that we definitely are an intelligent race, and the fact that we have made a lot of strides, as you said, Dr. Mango, in spite of everything.
Hmm.
Even in these days and times, we've made a lot of advances in spite of what's been happening to us and basically all the laws that were pointed at against us, but we still move forward.
Hmm.
Definitely
Hmm.
important to tell our history, even in addition to the classrooms at home. Our own families have to do that as well. And that reinforces the knowledge and education, and it reinforces our history to say that we are proud.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And before I would go back to uh, Dr. Mango, and my question to the world, somebody should have some questions. How do you lose a whole airplane? It's not like something you can put in your pocket, right? So we know what's happening, and we can go back to things that were uh, lost, supposedly. But much of our history, much of our inventions, or many of our inventions or information has been appropriated. I have a question for you, Dr. Mango. Who are your Black heroes in education? Historian, history speaking.
I'd say probably Mary McLeod Bethune. I think that she's probably one of my greatest heroes. And because what she was able to do was so little, and she stayed committed to and she was dark skinned,
Hmm.
and she was heavy set. And I think that is often overlooked in her establishment of Bethune-Cookman University for a woman to establish. There's
Hmm.
not many HBCUs named after Black people. It's about 5 or 6 HBCUs that actually are named after Black people. But Mary McLeod Bethune has one because of her vision. And it was and so she is one of the people that I look up to. And it's Booker T. Washington,
Mm-hmm.
I look up because what he was trying to do, he was trying to help Black people build a community first. He and people actually thought he was an Uncle Tom, believe it or not. Back in his day, he was considered a Uncle Tom by many. And because he was saying that, telling Black people, don't get involved in white people's politics. Create, you just got out of slavery. He was like, just, he was encouraging segregation. And so he was saying, build your, don't go up there trying to get an equal right to vote and all of that. You got to build your own communities first. Work in these HBCUs, get you a skill, get you a trade, build up your community first, do your own Black politics. I think that that wasn't well received, and
Mm-hmm.
it's still not well received when people talk like that. They're considered, I don't think we would consider, now they're considered, he would consider, be considered radical or a Black nationalist actually. But that's really what he was talking about, believe it or not. He was saying that Black people needed to build their own communities first. So his commitment to HBCUs, Grambling, he established Grambling, Tuskegee. So I like Booker T and Mary McLeod Bethune a lot in terms of their educational legacies.
Right. Clayton.
Yes. I have several, and being a military man, some of my heroes were the Tuskegee Airmen, which they trying to
Oh,
erase them out of the history
Mm,
because they never lost a plane that they escorted. But my favorite black
mm,
or African American was my mother.
oh,
I
yes.
mean, so she's not in the history books yet, but that woman, she taught me everything that a history book could possibly teach me.
Mm,
And she was able to, as you know, William, you was her first.
Mm-hmm.
She raised 8 children by herself majority of the time. She fed people that uh, was hungry when we didn't have anything to eat. She was able to stretch that. She worked 3 jobs at one particular time. The woman knew how to hustle, and she did not drive. She rode the bus wherever she had to go. She made it happen. And we talk about all the other people that's in history, but this woman I know for a fact, she was one of the greatest that ever walked this earth
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because she was able to persevere through some of the toughest times. She's not with us any longer, but I want to give her her flowers again uh, because the fact is, uh, she made that impact that the doctor was just talking about. Something that would leave something with you that would produce a legacy that would stick to you for the rest of your life. And my mother, her name was Eloise Gwendolyn
Gwendola.
Allen, Gwendola Allen Brown Sutherland. She had gotten married twice. And after that, she said, I have 7 sons. I don't need any more men around the house. I can handle this. That was one tough woman.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know firsthand.
And yeah, she's the top of in my history book.
Wow.
that's good.
Well said. She
Yeah,
also taught us strength, courage.
all of
Uh,
that.
yeah, that's right. How to survive and
How to
also
survive.
how to respect. That was
Yes.
one of her biggest things was respect.
Oh yeah, with an iron fist at times.
Oh yeah, I was on the other end of that sometimes
Yeah, I
too.
know he's gonna tell that story.
We're
He
gonna get
loves telling. Don't go there.
we
Don't
only
go
have
there.
25 minutes, so we're not going there. Okay,
Okay.
Tiff, what do you have?
Ah, um, my question is, if you were not teaching um history, what would you be doing?
Well, I actually, one of my goals, I probably would be a housewife, believe it or not.
Mm.
Like I enjoy taking care of my children, taking care of my husband, being at home, cleaning up, folding clothes. I'm in the public spotlight sometimes and doing my research and stuff. And Yeah, I enjoy my career, but I enjoy those more traditional things of, being a homemaker. Just that probably be something. But also, I come from a very business oriented family. So it's a few businesses that I am engaged in, and I have always been engaged in family businesses and stuff like that. So probably entrepreneurship, and even travel, even travel as well. One of the things about being a professor, it's so funny. When I first put on Facebook years ago, I just recently got my Facebook back, that I was a doctor, that I had finished my doctorate. People thought I had medical doctor money. And I'm like, no, I'm not that. Because people were sending me all these inboxes, like asking me. I'm like, wait a minute. It took me by storm. I didn't realize what was going on. They thought I was medical doctor. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not medical doctor. And they was like, she lying. She not no real doctor. I'm like, look, that's not what kind of doctor I am. But one of the things about being a professor, it's not money like people think. It's not medical doctor money, but we do have a lot of flexibility over our life. Because most of the time, most professors are weird. We're weird people, and it's because we have to think about these very complex issues, and it actually requires a lot. It takes a lot out of you. It's like giving a sermon. Every lecture is like a sermon. And so you come in, that's why it's called a professor. We're actually professing, we're coming from a deep place as a doctor of philosophy, and it takes a lot out of you. And so we're not able to work 5 days a week. So the point that I was trying to make is that we get a lot of flexibility despite us not making, I'm blessed and thankful for what I make, but we get a lot of, one of the good things about it is we get a lot of time over our life. And so that's probably it. So that's a great question. Thank you all.
I've got a question.
Mhm.
Are you from? You went to Grambling, if memory serves me correctly. Is that right?
Yes.
And are
Mhm.
you from Louisiana?
I am. I'm from right by Pineville, where he just
I
put
bet. I
that
bet you
up.
cook. I bet you cook a mean part of gumbo too, don't
Yeah, yeah. Well, we can't get our driver's license if that's a part of the driver's license test in Louisiana.
you?
After you drive, you take them to your house, and then they have to taste your gumbo, and then they make a determination from there whether or not you get your license.
I've had the chance of being in Louisiana once, and I find the people there uh, they're
Yes,
uh,
we are.
extremely friendly, and the food was off the chain.
Yes.
It
Yes,
was just
yes, it is.
absolutely incredible, incredible. Robert, let's go to you before. Wow, I can't believe we only have 20 minutes left. But Robert, you're up next.
Mhm. Uh, Thank you. Thank you. Um, I probably would say the one thing, and you also mentioned, Doctor, about everything that, what kind of drew you to, say, Virginia State as the school that you wanted to teach in? You could have gone anywhere we wanted to.
Hmm.
And what led you to VSU?
Well, it's so interesting. I always, coming from the HBCUs in the Deep South, like Grambling, Southern, Jackson State, and all of that. I grew up in that culture, and I had heard of Virginia State on TV when I was a child. It was on the television show College Hill, and when I was getting my PhD
Mhm.
at Morgan State, it was a few people in the program with me that had went to Virginia State. And it was hard for me, believe it or not, it was hard for me because I grew up in Louisiana where LSU was a white school. I didn't know that HBCUs was named like Virginia State University. I thought that the white schools was named Louisiana State University, coming from Louisiana. And so I kept asking my classmates, I was like, yeah, I remember that show in college. I was like, so it's an HBCU? And it was like, yeah, it's an HBCU. But it was hard for me to understand that because I came from where LSU was the state school. And I just always had this. I would go visit the website to Virginia State. It's so interesting that I ended up here. I just always, out of all the HBCUs, I just wanted to be at Virginia State. And it just so happened that God made a way for me to be there. And so that's how I ended up there. It was almost like fate or destiny because I just had this affinity for Virginia State. And so I'm so thankful that and I'm gonna tell you something about Virginia State. Virginia State is very, very much, it's like it's like Howard. It's not like, I actually taught at Grambling before I came to Virginia State. And I love my school, but I could tell that we focused on football, with the students. And I love my school. But a lot of it has to do with where we ranked and stuff. We ranked 49th out of 50th in education and stuff. But Virginia is ranked 10th. When I got to Virginia State, the students was just so smart. The faculty was so competitive, getting grants and research, and all. It just made me, the environment is just so, I just love it. I love Virginia State. I love
I
it.
agree.
Uh,
And see, I started at Virginia State when it was Virginia State College,
Okay.
and yes, and then it transitioned to Virginia State University. It was during the time of apartheid, and we was going through a whole lot of our history and uh, recognizing what was going on over in South Africa and Nelson Mandela being locked up for no reason and the whole nine. And you're right, it has a lot of rich history at Virginia State, and but the people there are resilient, and I know we
Yes.
were very resilient. So I appreciate you stepping in and continuing that legacy as well. So I appreciate it.
uh,
Yes.
Dr.
Actually,
Man,
Mm,
Virginia State is the first. A lot of people don't, it's the first state public HBCU, and they fought for that. The history of it is so remarkable that you had Black people right after slavery who were former slaves who went to the legislator and had a deal with former Confederates who had just tried to
yeah.
enslave them and made Virginia State the world's first public school college for Black people. And so it was a lot riding on that. If Virginia State didn't succeed, Grambling State wouldn't have succeeded. North Carolina State wouldn't Central wouldn't have succeeded. None of the public HBCUs, Morgan State, Delaware State, Virginia State set the model for all HBCUs that were state funded public HBCUs. If Virginia State did not succeed, we probably wouldn't have state public HBCUs, and which are actually the stronger HBCUs, with the exception of a few like Morehouse and stuff like that. The stronger HBCUs happen to be the state HBCUs. So Virginia State, and they fought for that. And what's so interesting about that fight is the founder, Alfred Harris, he put in it was so revolutionary. He put it, because people don't realize HBCU's image has kind of gotten soft, but we don't realize that to exist, it was actually it was a fight, even for us to exist in an integrated environment. Um, After integration, for us to have a Black identity in 2025
Mm,
is really a rare phenomenon. But going back to the founding of Virginia State, the founder put in the charter that Virginia State had to have all Black faculty. When the state legislature passed this, that it had to have all Black faculty, all Black students, and it had to have an all Black board and only one non-Black person on the board. So the way that they set that up right after slavery was
mm.
remarkable, that they got the legislator. They had the legislator to do that as well.
I got one more question. I hate to hog the mic,
No, no,
but
no.
uh,
Mhm.
with all the talk about uh, taking away funding for HBCUs, where you think we are headed with all of that?
Well, it's so interesting that and I was saying this last week. My area of research is actually the American presidency and HBCUs. I'm a presidential historian, and I wrote I worked in the HBCU office under Obama as an intern, and I wrote my dissertation. All my research is on the American presidency and HBCUs.
Okay.
And so this is actually my thing. So it's just like if a professor studied COVID all their life and then COVID happened, they like, oh my God, like my research is actually. So I didn't know when I was studying the American presidency and HBCUs that we would be at this point. But believe it or not, I'm not gonna go out on a limb and speak for it's a lot of uncertainties, but certain people never wanted integration. Certain group, the Republicans, okay, and Republican presidents actually supported HBCUs at very high rates, namely Ronald Reagan. HBCUs would not have existed if Ronald Reagan didn't make a decision when he was slashing all kinds of funding similar to it. And he said, well, wherever I slash for education, I want you to give every $1 for education. He said, I want you to give HBCUs $5. And you can Google this. He actually saved Meharry Medical College. He gave HBCUs a stimulus package. And he's the one that actually gave HBCUs their own week, National HBCU Week and stuff like that. Now, I think that it might be a challenge because HBCUs have gotten too involved in these presidential politics recently. I don't think that it might have not been the best decision for Howard to have Kamala Harris's campaign headquarters as Howard. I don't think that was the best thing for HBCUs.
For the target.
Yeah, I don't think that was that. We've always, the only way that we've survived is through conservatives and liberal Democrats and Republicans, because everybody had their own reason for why they supported HBCUs. The people who didn't want affirmative action and civil rights, they was like, please, yes, keep them schools open. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How much y'all need?
That's right.
Please. Yeah, as long as y'all stay over there, just give us the athletes and but so I think it has become a perception that certain groups that we might perceive as racist or whatever, but they loved HBCUs. It was the best thing because we pull ourselves out by our bootstraps.
That's it.
We've done a lot with a little. They love that.
Yes.
We represent that. We represent doing a lot with a little, high productivity with a little bit of money. You can't find nothing that's to produce more with little than turning a whole enslaved population into a professional class with a little bit of money. That's high level of productivity. So a lot of people some people might perceive as anti-HBCU are extremely pro-HBCU. Probably for some reasons that we might not like. Right. But it's really still beneficial for us if we play our cards right, and we can't be getting too, we got to stay apolitical. We got to stay in the middle for us to survive, because this is the last thing that we have from integration. We've lost everything else. The last thing that we have is our religious institutions and is HBCUs. So we can't be having our campaign headquarters and all of that. I don't know about that. Like we gotta play this thing right. We can't be too engaged on this side and too engaged on that side. We trying to survive. We know what's ahead of us.
Well, we all know that some of the greatest minds ever in this country came from HBCUs. There's no question about it. What I'm impressed with, and one of the most prestigious, what amazes me, the Atlanta Triangle. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Clark, Spelman, Morehouse College, all found in Atlanta. What do they call it? They call it the Atlanta Complex,
Center. I believe. It's called the AU Center. The Atlanta University Center.
Okay. Outstanding. Outstanding. Yep.
Yeah.
Robert?
Yes, absolutely. And also, just talking about HBCUs, we have one specific event that's actually coming up in the West Virginia State University. The
Mhm.
Yellow Jackets, they're holding what's known as a Groove Week. That's going to be taking place on April the 24th through the 26th, and have all various different types of events going to be taking place, including there's going to be an awards dinner. There's also going to be various different parties, but most importantly, there's also going to be the Edgar Randall Annual Cancer Foundation Basketball Classic on the 25th at 7 p.m. And also on the 26th, there's going to be a cookout for people to come out and just have yourself a good time, followed by a step show. That's April 24th to 26th this year at West Virginia State University. So definitely come on out to that, as well as, or if you're in the North Carolina area, we know that group's going to be holding a huge event April the 24th to the 27th. So lots of undergrads are going to be in the area, but if you're in the Elizabeth City State University area, come out and see the grooves, and also our sisters will be there too. So
Very good.
just
How
Outstanding.
far how far
promoting.
away is that from you, Tiffany?
Which one?
The event
Elizabeth,
that he was just speaking of.
Elizabeth City. Elizabeth City is probably closer to Virginia border, so probably about a couple hours and a half, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I tell you, there's a lot. I'm putting up. I have my camera off because I'm trying to put up the information how you guys can go back and listen to this show. It's going to be on. I'll put it up on the screen in a second. StudioW.buzz. That's the website. So the show will be up in its entirety. So if you want to share with your friends, you can do that. Also on YouTube, Studio W The Buzz. Studio W The Buzz. I said Alexa, Facebook, and our stream Studio W.Buzz. Also, the Apple app, our Android app should be back online here pretty soon. But anyway, Studio W, download it on your phone. You can take it with you all day long, with your home, gym, office, or play. You can check us out all day long. We've got 3 minutes left to go. Dr. Mango, what question would you have would you have, if you were us on the panel, what question would you have asked yourself?
um, that's a hard one. I would probably say, um, what do I will we be able to celebrate Black history in the future with all the changes going on?
Wow.
Or what does this mean? The the era that we're in right now, what does it mean for Black history from a historical perspective? Um, and I probably would say that it's quite possible that we might not. Black history is relatively, as a field of study, we're talking about a 100-year period in this country. After being here 400 years, we've only had like 100 years since 1926 to be able to actually systematically evaluate our history. And it's possible that we might not be able to study. Next year, you might not be able to have this conversation.
Mm.
It might be banned. It might be illegal. My job, my whole degree might be considered subversive. So
Mhm.
I think that our level of comfort that we've enjoyed uh, um, is something that we need to maybe reconsider. Um, and I think we need to get into our history more. I think that we need to really vigorously study our history while we still have opportunity. You know, uh, like I said, it's one thing to be comfortable and friendly, but it's another thing to face reality and to face the reality of our history. And it's not, and that's why I was saying it's a very complicated story.
Mhm.
And so I never was even, before certain words and certain concepts were banned, dealing with maybe some things with equity and stuff like that. I always told my students that it was a privilege that they was able to study African American history, because I knew that it was very controversial to be able to study. I knew that that's how you actually made a slave. We were made by an inability to actually know who we were. That's how you
Yeah.
made a slave. That's
Yes.
what made us docile. That's like walking around in the dark.
Mm.
When you walking around in the dark, it's like you're in a constant, you don't know where you're going. It's a constant stress. You can't even process what might be beyond. You just trying to find the light. And so, you know, so I understood that the processes of making a slave involved an inability to study history, an inability to know who we were, an inability to understand our origins on a systematic level. And so once you begin to ban those processes again, essentially you have to ask the question, what does freedom look like? Now
Mm,
for us, we're comfortable, but what happens if this continues 50 years from now, 100 years from now?
mhm,
Uh how these processes will continue? What type of black person will exist at that at that time?
mhm,
And so that's why I began, and I'm glad that we're ending on this point. I began this show by talking about how important it was to be able to speak freely, to be
mhm.
able to record history, to be able to catalog, document, mass reproduce our feelings, our stories, and the reason. And I talked about how overwhelming it was, and how sometimes before classes, my students might not know this, that I cry. Um,
Mm.
that is emotional because I understand what I'm doing is uh, an honor. So while we might be in the beginning of certain trends, these things have happened before. And so
Mhm.
these are part of very long existing processes that have happened not before. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I encourage everyone to study history. I
Mhm.
think at the end of the day, if we look at any discipline, any outlook that would help us try to figure out which direction to go in, it's history. I don't, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a historian. Economics might have a little bit, but you can't do anything without the history. The
That's
history
right.
is the root. It's the base. It's the map, the compass, the guideline. So get as many history books as you can. Listen to much history as you can, and
Mhm.
remember that in certain situations, it sheds a light on how glorious it is to actually be able to study history and have the freedoms that we have.
Absolutely. I mentioned to the panel that my commitment is that each show going throughout the year, not only this month of February, throughout the year, say there's an educator or there is a business person or there's someone that's in medicine or science or whatever it is. I pull someone out of our history that has done that and try to make it blend in a way of teaching and then bring on someone that's current that's doing that particular thing. And my dedication is that I'm so glad that we're an independent station, okay, and we have a chance to do this and to take this away. That means it, America as an experiment is over because that means that your First Amendment right is gone. Okay, so we're gonna keep talking. We're gonna keep talking. Uh, if this was a station that was backed by the federal government, that might be something different. Or if I had a sponsor that funded this station there, and they didn't like what we would talk about, they could pull their funding. So, but since we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of resources, but we do have a microphone and we do have a voice. I want to thank you, Dr. Mango, and will you please come back sometime?
Of
Please.
course.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Last word, Robert, and then Clayton, and then Tiffany.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Mango, for being on today. And actually, ending on a nice note, I just saw in the news that The White House has now reinstated an HBCU scholars program that was originally held back or frozen of funds. So the idea of when it comes down to our people, one of the things that we definitely have is, like you said, that would be the power of your voice. And eventually, people will hear, and if enough people speak out, change is effective.
That's right. That's right. Clayton?
Yes, first I want to thank you, Dr. Mango, for being our campus advisor because you didn't have to do that, but you stepped up, and we do appreciate you. And I agree with all that you said, and we are a resilient people. We're going to get through all of this. It may look bleak to a lot of our people, but the thing is, I see the light,
Mm.
and we're just strong people. They can't like they say, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So that's me, and I'm ready. I'm ready because we've lost a lot of our leaders. A lot of passed on. We don't know who the new leaders that's coming up and coming. But the thing is, you are one. We appreciate what you do. Keep on teaching what you're teaching, and all of us have to do our due diligence and do the same. Thank you,
That's
Doc.
right. That's right. And never give up. Tiffany.
Never give.
So it was honestly a pleasure in meeting you and to see the enthusiasm that you have for teaching and
Mhm.
teaching history, Black history. That right there is um, very important to see. And I appreciate you for being an example and also being a proud member of Swing. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
All right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to thank our sister Rock. Okay. Sister Rock, because what she does, she brings on, she gets in contact with the guests, she brings them on, she's scheduled to get, and the work that she does, I mean, I'm just so proud of her, and I can't thank her enough for doing what she does. And
Thank you,
so
Rock.
I'm going to close it out. I asked Rock also, what is the favorite song? What is the favorite song that swings like to hear? They like to